welcome to Unplugged with Nicki Marie. This is episode 7, and 7 is a very lucky number. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm very lucky to have this guest on my show today because we all know her as Supernanny. But to me, and IG, she is Joe Frost. Not only did she tell us, I mean, Joe, I was listening to you before I was a parent. I was watching the show before I was a parent, and I was feeling shook for the parents. And now, bump years and years later, and I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, Joe Frost, the super nanny commented on one of my videos. So that's why we're here today, because you have gone nowhere. But one of our first conversations was, wait a minute, I put down this stuff and then I picked it back up to come online, and you were like, what is happening? So
Well,
let's talk about just that. Like, what is happening in
yeah.
parenting today?
Well, thank you for having me. And yes, it's been interesting to watch your journey unfold, like many families' journeys. I mean, look, people have known me now for 20 years publicly doing the Supernanny show, right? But I also am an executive producer and develop other shows, which are all about helping families, right? So there are several shows, and I write books and I travel around the world helping families, headlining parental conferences, doing what I love to do, right? Which is helping families. However, when social media became very, very big, just over a decade ago, really, maybe 12, 14 years ago, it was interesting to watch human behavior on that social media. And so when we were in the midst of really a global pandemic, it was interesting to watch how families were showing up and what habits were being established. And not all of them were good, right? And I'd just finished doing another season of Supernanny, and I shut shop to make sure everybody was safe, right? And well, I've not gone anywhere. People are like, she's back. I've not gone anywhere. I've
Yeah,
always
I think
been,
it's
I've
I think
always
it's
been here
IG,
helping families,
right?
right?
I think it's the Instagram presence in you engaging in this mom community in a way that feels attainable, right? You have been a celeb to so many of us, and now you're like the girl next door who's the mom trying to support the
Yeah,
moms.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's exactly what I was doing, like I think people watching, but the beauty of social media allows us all to be able to communicate and interact with one another, rather than sort of being a fly on the wall and watching me with a family and watching their experience unfold. And so there's the
Right.
beauty of that, because it allows me to be able to converse with families in the moment, as things are happening, or posts that are relatable. Hence your experiences with your children, right?
Right. That was one of the first I'll be honest with you, you're one of the biggest reasons why I started this podcast. And I didn't
Mm.
tell you that offline. You are 35 weeks ago, I posted that Cracker Barrel video, and it was funny and it was vulnerable and it was real, but that moment was so hard. And I felt like I did a good job, but I just remember the wheels were turning, and I'm thinking, this is because my kid is this way, and this is because my ego was inflamed when he was doing that in front of other people, and it was the sugar. He had apple juice, it was the sugar. I tried to make everything make sense. And then you came on and commented on it, and there were a lot of people that were like, never, a 7-year-old should never act like that, that's a shame, or that kid needs a crack. And that made me feel like, oh my gosh, we've got so far to come in understanding each other and our own children's development. So
Correct.
let's talk about the Cracker Barrel video.
Correct. But let's talk about let's talk about the real statement of what you just made. Everybody's child is different. Everybody's child has a different temperament, different personality. Every family is uniquely their own, and circumstances will vary. Yes, we can look at children and we can say this is a somewhat shape of development or expectations with respects to age. And then we can look at stereotypical, neurodiverse, and have a look at how that changes a circumstance. And take a look at the parent and their journey. And what you're really talking about is empathy. What you're really saying is we need to just have more empathy in understanding, right, what other parents are going through, and to support that, whatever that is, rather than to show up and belittle another human being. Pass comment if you want to, but can we just keep it social and dignified? And can we still have some social conduct and some etiquette, please? Because there's an awful amount of people that are extremely disrespectful and rude. And I don't feel that there's any room for that on social media. We can give our different opinions, we can give comments, and we can give what we believe is our truth. But that doesn't mean that we're shaming someone, right? If we're giving the truth about how we feel, that's really about how the other person is receiving that, right? But it does lead us then to recognize how gullible and exposed we are if we choose to share that information online, right? And that's exactly how it made you feel. Like, as a parent, you shared a very relatable circumstance that has happened to all of us, right? But then in doing that, you're open to all the different comments that are going to sort of unfold for that. So if I may crack open the Cracker Barrel experience,
I'm
right?
getting a consultation from Joe right now. I'm all ears.
In that moment, Chase had 3 sweets. Like you said, he couldn't make a decision because he wanted them all. And you were basically saying to him that he had to. And he didn't want to. And in your circumstance, what it required was the initiative to bring him to a place of having to make a decision and prioritize, at the same time as recognizing as a parent, you were now feeling very self-conscious of yourself because he was showing up a certain way and everybody else was watching you. And when children know that your voice is changing because you're in a situation where everyone's watching you, it doesn't sound like, Chase, make a decision, otherwise you're going to have to put more back. It looks like, darling, come and make a decision. Look, just one or the other, okay? Just come on now, one or the other. And everybody's looking at me and I want the ground to swallow me up. So will you make a decision, please? Because you're really embarrassing mummy. That's exactly what it sounds like to a child. And they know it because it's not how you would behave at home. So we have this situation where really the child is like, I want all 3. And you're like, well, no, choose one. And they're like, I want all 3. And I'm going to carry on saying I want all 3 because right now you're showing your hand and your cards are showing me you're embarrassed. And if I keep you in this place long enough, you might give me all 3. But here's the caveat.
My heart my heart rate is increasing just hearing
Right?
it.
But here's the caveat with it all, right? Which I think is a huge consideration. Is that one of those executive functioning skills for Chase is about prioritizing and being flexible enough and not so rigid to actually make a decision. And so where that person commented, because I saw it, oh, this is ridiculous for a 7-year-old. Every 7 should be able to do that. Not so for a child who's ND, because that takes work and that takes patience. And you're asking that child who's neurodiverse to actually sit there and have to think about being in an uncomfortable position because now they have to prioritize and make a decision. And that doesn't take 1 second. That takes a moment. And you have to sit in that uncomfortability for at least 30 seconds before they and try and select an eeny, meeny, miny, mo of which one they're going to let go, right? So it
Yes.
requires you at that moment to have turned round and just put a boundary in place and say, look, it's only one. If you can't make a decision with one, then we'll have to put them all back. And at that point, knowing Chase's personality, because I've observed it enough through your IGs, right? Hell no, if he was going to put them all back. He was not going to do that. He's going to take one, then none, right? So if you'd have subtly forced that hand in saying, look, we can't just hang out here all day, so you're going to have to pick one or we're going to have to put them all back. He would have got to that place eventually in picking one by selecting that. The problem is that each child is different and you have to know your child. And your child does show, and I don't know if they've been diagnosed, but they do show characteristic traits of having ADHD, which means that those executive functions, okay, take time because children's brains are rewired differently. And on top of that, we have to take into consideration that as a parent, we also know our child. So we also know when our child is digging their heels in, and on a temperament level, they're just being stubborn and they want what they want as a 7-year-old. Because it's all of that. As parents,
in the generation of Amazon and Domino's Pizza, you could watch the delivery, and Amazon, you could order something and it's here on your porch the same freaking day.
Correct.
And no commercials on the, YouTube shorts when they're watching. I'm like, wow. If I were a kid with my neurodivergency, which I've always had, this didn't just pop up for me surprisingly in adulthood, but I got the chatterbox on the report cards and I got the, all those things about like, but I came from a great family. And back then we were just thrown into the mix. There wasn't all this talk about stuff, right? So I learned to bury my feelings. I learned to bury my indecisiveness. I learned to bury my wants and desires and think, oh, the world is going to give me what I want if I deserve it. And now we're raising kids who were like, you're going to be a badass, but to get through parenting, is going to be really freaking hard.
It's going to require you, in that moment, it required you to sit through that moment of, oh my God, he's behaving this way. The lady's looking at me in the counter, and it becomes hey, look, you got to choose one of them out the three. So let's just sit a little bit longer and think about which one it's going to be. But we need to just move. We got to get that done because we got to go, right? It's not like you're talking to a 30-year-old. I know you're really sad because you can't have 3, and these are made all the way in Canada, and we know that the wrappings are beautiful. It's not like it's
right. And you said empathy, right? And I think a lot of people think you're the tough love woman, but you're talking about the tough love is empathy.
the tough
Am I
love.
right?
The tough love is this. There is a blanket on social media of a narrative that says there's no such thing as tough love. Tough is authoritarian. Well, for a start, I'm not authoritarian. I'm assertive. And I know how to confidently lead a parent into a space of leading their family, right? Tough love is loving on your kids and making the decisions for them that they can't make for themselves right now because they cannot see it. And as much as it's tough for them to experience it, it feels tough for you because you have to make it. But being a parent requires you sometimes to make decisions that are not a walk in the park. We feel like feelings too about it. We may have said, look, you know what, if this is going to carry on and you're not going to move here, then we're going to end up not being able to make X, Y, and Z. And the lesson is playing that through so they can learn the lesson, so they can feel the disappointment, so that they can think about what that is. Right now, no parent wants their kids to feel. We only want them to feel happy thoughts. We're not in control, nor should we be, of making our children happy. We're
Yeah.
here to guide our children and to facilitate opportunities for them to grow and to learn through all the feels. And
Right.
sometimes those feels are going to be disappointing for them. Sometimes they're going to be pissed off with some of those feels. Sometimes they're going to be frustrated. Sometimes they're going to be angry. Sometimes they're going to be elated. Sometimes they're going to be scared. Sometimes they're going to be anxious. Sometimes they're going to be really fearful. All the feels. Our space is to not project. Not
Mm.
project. Be the, be the tree trunk. Be the solid tree
So
trunk with the
yeah,
roots.
when you say, I love that roots, and like I always think of myself because I like sports terms. I always think of myself as like I am the coach of this home team. Like I'm the head coach. I'm putting the plays together and watching them succeed, on their game days. But when
Or
you
think of
say,
the picture. Nikki, think of the picture. You think of baseball and you think of the
yeah,
pitcher. The pitcher, those legs are firm on the ground, so the top half can,
yeah, yeah,
right? But here, that training for that pitcher, that training is all legs. That workout is all solid legs. So they're firm on the ground and loose here to be able to, right?
yes.
That's us. Whether it's a tree analogy, sports analogy, you've got to be able to move and be flexible enough and fluid sometimes
I
and
love that.
calm.
The flexible and fluid. And then the calm one I got to work on. Flexible and fluid, I got down. The calm and then not making it about myself or my overstimulation or what I expected this to be like.
Yes.
So there's the projection, right?
Yes.
Is like, I would have never talked to my mom that way in public, or I would have never put up a stink in the store. Is that what you mean by projection? We're putting what we would have done on our kids?
What I mean is that the way your parent taught you was more authoritarian because the parenting style did not expand any room for considering your feelings. And now we've gone so far the other way
Yeah.
that we consider feelings and we have forgotten to place healthy boundaries in place so that it brings our children to a place of becoming more centered so that they can emotionally regulate, so that we can uphold our boundaries, so that we can, nudge them subtly into a space of following through, making that
Mm,
decision.
yes.
We can't we don't want to enable, right?
Right.
We don't want to
Like,
enable
hey,
them.
listen, I'm guilty of it. The other day, my daughter, I mean, she partied like a rock star with the birthday parties and the sleepover and all the stuff and the junk food, right? And I in the back of my head knew, I said, Sunday morning, we're going to be paying for this shit because I can already see it. Sunday morning, she woke up and she had field hockey at 8 a.m. and her finger had gotten jammed in the bounce house the day before. And she's like, Mom, I'm not going to be able to hold the stick. And Mom, and I'm thinking, I've got all these flashes of what to do inside my head. One side of me was like, she's only 10. Give her the morning off from field hockey. It's not that big a deal. And then the other side of me is like, when I was 10, I would have gotten myself hurt and I would have showed up because I had grit and I had resilience and I was like, right? So we're doing all these things based on our own ego. And that's how we're parenting in
because
so many
because
ways.
we're not because we're projecting our own sort of inner child of what we needed more of. So you have very openly expressed that your your thoughts weren't considered. It didn't matter how you felt, right? And so
Well, I was like, I mean, my parents divorced when I was 3. They were very young. And my grandparents, I was the only granddaughter. I was the only I was the only child.
Yes.
So I didn't have conflict, but Joe, and this strikes a chord with a lot of the moms who I've spoken outwardly to. I've said, some of my funny deliveries are like, I was the really good kid, like the really, really, really good kid that was go with the flow. And I didn't want conflict with anyone. And that wasn't because of any family trauma. It was just my wiring.
But
And now, but now I talk about being that mom who was go with the flow and conflict avoidant. And now I have two kids who are like, so my personality is very chill, go with the flow. And I have two kids that I can't be like that with because they will eat me alive.
but you know what they do though? You know what they do is that they bring up something in your own upbringing that actually does need attention, which is those that avoid conflict, healthy conflict, get taught how to go with the flow and smooth over.
Totally.
Because families that smooth over, right, are fearful of the
Sure.
ramifications of what conflict would have meant, right?
Yes.
Your children are raised because you do talk to them emotionally about what they're feeling, and they know that how they feel is considered by you, right? And you do care, and you're having a conversation about what they think and how is it they feel about whatever it is, that they have no fear, as they should not have, to say, Mom, but I feel this way.
Yeah.
And when they do that, what it does, it brings up for you, in the face of that, a reminder of, oh, we're going there. But we normally go and smooth over and go with the flow. And that's a lesson for you to like step back for a minute and go, okay, let's have that conversation. Because what it truly does create is more emotional intimacy, where children can be vulnerable, express their deepest desires and fears and thoughts, and be supported. But it has to be yin yang. It has
Right.
to be yin
And
yang. We have to
so
do that.
right, and them lashing out with their thoughts and feelings and saying it in a way that triggers you is the really hard part, right? So I talk to a lot of moms who are like, oh my gosh, my daughter just turned 8, and it's like I don't even recognize her the way she's talking to me,
That's
right?
different. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's
That's
talk about that.
different.
That's a big one.
When you get to children that are like 7, 8, and 9 years old, and they are
Yep.
expressing how they feel and they blurt it out, and children who have neurodivergent characteristic traits or have been diagnosed, right?
Yep.
They're impulsive. So those feelings are also really big, right? And they
Yeah.
have big feelings. So you may be looking at other circumstances as well, right? Other conditions. So you may have a child that's ND, but also very highly sensitive, right? And so those feelings become magnified as well. So when those children blurt out how they feel, they're not thinking, oh, I better behave in the way I deliver this or what I say. They're just innocently saying it. However, that doesn't mean that we don't turn around and say this. Hey, look, clearly I can see, because it looks like, right, you're very upset about this situation and you want to talk about it. And I'd love to be able to sit down and talk to you about this. However, what I'm not okay is you calling me names, and I'm not okay with you shouting. We can use our normal indoor conversational voice, and let's talk about this so that we can hear each other and understand each other. Now, that is important, right? That's really important, because we want to teach our children, and we want to be the model of being able to say, look, we can express how we feel, but it doesn't mean that we disrespect somebody in us conveying how we feel. And we've got to know the difference, and we've got to teach our children the difference, because otherwise they're going to do what I'm seeing the increasing problem at school with, which is they're showing up at school, they are emotionally in a space of overwhelm, and they have not learnt those coping skills of how to take a minute, how to
Yeah.
breathe, how to sit with the discomfort with knowing that you're there, calm and collected and composed. And then they end up hitting, throwing chairs, punching teachers in the groin and the stomach, and teachers are in a space of
Oh
it's
my gosh.
terrible, as well as
So
parents.
do you think that so do you think that like where does that come in at home? Like totally your perspective on because let's put it this way, when I frame this podcast, the biggest thing I want to say to parents, because we're raising daughters, we're raising sons. I have a
We're
completely
raising children. Let's forget
we're,
about
but we're raising
we're
children.
raising children. Like, I don't subscribe to the
Okay.
boy, the girl, whatever. We're raising children.
Okay.
We're raising human beings, right?
All right. Because I do tend to worry. I'm like, oh my gosh, the mother with the son and coddling him and making him feel like he's like you hear the word narcissism all the time, and all I think is I want my son to be a really good
Well, let's
guy.
talk about that. Let's just talk about that and
Yeah.
unpack that for a minute. Every child, it's every child's rite of passage to be nurtured, to be loved on. The little goofy things, the little things you do with your son and your daughter, the things that really, like, I know that with my grandson, right? He's still ticklish under here, right? And the little things I'll do with him, and he's like, nanny, like this, and you nurture, you love on your kids. But that's very different to mollycoddling, because mollycoddling your children is doing everything for them and helicoptering everything and disabling the fact that they are capable of doing things themselves, right? We want to nurture children. Men who grow up without a mother's love of nurture,
A
right,
nurture.
become very
So the
hard men.
nurture.
What I think's most important for parents is to understand the importance of how we nurture and provide this healthy relationship with our children, where we actually have a fun relationship with them that incorporates the importance of those boundaries and consequences, accountability, and also that emotional intimacy, that emotional intelligence, right? But we don't at the same time arrest our children's development by emotionally keeping them arrested like they're 5 years old, when they're 8 years old or 9 years old and more than capable of being able to do things themselves. Listen, Nicki, I'm
Yeah.
helping parents where there are 9-year-olds in this country, in the USA, 9-year-olds that don't know how to use a knife and fork or wipe their own butts. I mean, come on,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
where's the line? The line
Right.
between showing kindness and taking your kid's backpack and say, I'll carry it, but then sometimes letting them carry it. The line between your children sitting around the table and you collecting the plates, but
Yep.
knowing they're 10 years old and they can take the plates and put it in the sink.
Okay,
Because
so talk about that from a practical standpoint, because I am guilty of some of this stuff, and it's like I always get to the point where I'm like, I think they're going to just all
okay,
of a sudden morph into it.
okay, so let's do the root cause.
Yeah,
Where does the guilt come from?
the guilt of not doing it for them.
No, why? You said that I feel I'm guilty of this and I do it for them. So
Yeah,
let's go. Why do you do it for them?
I think I have this like, oh, this is vulnerable for me to
It
say
is,
publicly.
but we're in
But
a good
I'm gonna
space.
say I feel like I have this hero, like this heroism cape on. And I don't know if it's because of how close I was with my grandmother on my dad's side. She was like the epitome
Right,
of
stop
like,
there for a minute. Stop there.
yeah,
We're
yes,
gonna cut this for a minute. We're gonna chop this up. So I asked you about why you do it for your children, and you said because I have this thing about being a hero. So you want to be a hero for your children, and you want them to look at you as their hero.
I
Now,
think so.
now tell me why. Why?
I think it's like this feeling of like legacy and forever. And when they're old, it's like these, it's hard to put in words, but it's these flashes in my head of what being a mother is. It's this like bond and this safe place. And when I got to college and we used to do visualizations for field hockey, right? We were doing visuals of like the game, the tough moments. You would put yourself in a place where you felt most yourself and most at peace. And it was always my grandmother's couch. And that's the relationship we had. It was very nurturing. She would always like tickle my arms. We would
Because
talk about
because
everything.
because because Nikki, if I may, and you can
Yep.
do, if this is too much, then you can edit this how you want, right?
Yes.
Because your grandmother saw you in a way that, as much as your mum loved you, she didn't see you the same way as your grandma saw you. Your
Thousand.
grandma tapped into a side of you that made you feel very seen. That even though you know your mum loved you,
Oh yeah.
she didn't see you in the same way that you felt when your grandma was with you. And
1000%.
and that there in the bottle, that right there that you keep close in your heart, that feeling that meant so much to you, feeling that way, is what you now want your children to
Yes.
feel. And you're
Yes.
trying to now replicate that as a mother, right?
1000%. When my superpower is when my kids come downstairs in the morning from waking up, I am the first place they go to. And I will make sure, even if I'm doing all this other stuff, I'll make sure that I'm on the couch to like just greet them into the day. And it's very like, I'm not like, blah, 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 you got to do this and you got to, it's very like, let's get our,
So to a degree, to a degree, the consciousness that you need to be aware of is not overcompensating for where it lacked in your mother's home. It doesn't mean that
right.
because your mum didn't give it to you 100% there, that she
Yeah.
didn't give you other things. Because to be honest with you,
She
no,
gave me some really amazing
yeah,
things.
and to be
Yes.
honest with you, no parent has the capacity to give a child 100% all of the time. Are you kidding me? Like, no one, right?
Right.
But the pressure that you put on yourselves, that many parents put on themselves to tick 100% scorecard is
Right.
impossible. It's literally
Right.
impossible. So your awareness is a good thing, but not if it prohibits the children from developing at the emotional age that they are, of learning to do the tasks that will
Yeah.
make them more competent, because competency breeds confidence.
I love that. So go totally into that.
Okay.
That's like something so many of us need to hear. I was having a conversation with my one of my best friends. We're both great moms. Great moms. We both know it. And we both said to each other yesterday after our kids' play date, we said, can you imagine our two moms standing here and having this conversation about where we need to get better and where we need to and who's doing what? And I said, it's crazy. That's all we're talking about is how to become better mothers. And we're already freaking great moms.
But it
But this
doesn't, but
generation is,
you're
yeah,
already, you're already, but we mustn't let we mustn't let parenting define us so much that we lose ourselves.
yeah,
Because parenting is not about defining us as a mother or father. We shouldn't, that shouldn't be our identity. It is a part of our journey for some of us, but it shouldn't be our whole existence and identity. You're Nicki, and you have the things that you love and you want to do in your journey and your life, and parenting and motherhood is a part of that. And there are
yeah,
many, many different facets of you, right? But it's not, and it's a piece of you, but it's not entirely, it doesn't define, it's not the whole identity of you. And so it's important that you're more consciously aware of your own upbringing, right? And you have this maturity that allows you to be able to look at your two parents and know that these two human beings were just doing really the best that they could.
Oh, yeah.
And even if they weren't doing the best that they could because they were in perhaps circumstances that were way over their head at the time, that is what it is, and you can't change that.
Yeah.
But what you can change is becoming aware of that, understanding that, and then making it different for your own family. And so when you become aware of that, the most important thing to do is not to overcompensate, but to turn around and separate what you recognize you need to give sort of really little Nicki, right? And the moments when you feel triggered in your parenting, because really children just highlight that. Children come to you and they highlight with a great big fat Sharpie pen all the things that you need to work on yourself and maketh you as a parent. They will
Oh,
bring out the best of you because it will be required. And that may mean you doing less of something or more of something and becoming more aware of that over time, right? They're pure and innocent,
yeah.
just loving children being themselves, right? If this the one major thing that we learn from children is that they show up being them until adults change that, right? So you want to be in a
Yeah.
space of more conscious awareness, right, of your own upbringing, and really ask yourself the questions of what do you value as a family? How do you want to raise your children? What's really important to you? What's really important to your family overall? And to have a life yourself, right? And
Yeah.
to look at your support system as well. And to recognize that each day is different, and to recognize also that there's going to be days when you screw up. There's going
Oh,
to
yeah.
be days when it's tits up. You're like, what happened? What
Yes.
happened? It was,
There's some days they get on the bus and I'm like, holy shit, that morning was rough. And other days I'm like, wow, I'm the best mom ever. This was great.
but
Everybody's
but
good. We're like,
but let's change that best mum, not mum, best mum.
yeah,
Like your mum, and they love you unconditionally. Your mum. And
yes.
today you're doing the best you can. And you know what? Some days you know that you're not as well. You're like, do you know what? I totally am not doing good today. I'm having a rough day. The kids are pissing me off. I'm agitated. I'm annoyed about something else. I'm projecting on the kids. And you know what? I need a reset. I need a reset
That was
right
me
now.
yesterday. Can we just pause there? I need a reset. Also, your kids love you for who you are through the imperfect times. I love so much about what Joe has said already. And I thought this episode was going to be 35 minutes. Turns out we're going to have a part one and a part two because we recorded for an hour and 20 minutes and it's all good and juicy. So thank you for being here for part one. Please look forward to part two, which will launch a week from today, Mondays, 3:33. This will be next week's episode, will be the part two. Let's talk about cycle breaking. Let's talk about being graceful with ourselves as parents. And let's talk about empowering our kids by presence and conscious ass parenting. I love you. We got this. Holly girl, stay for more. And thanks for being here.